Medicine, Infectious Diseases, Public Health, and Epidemiology. He is former director of the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and former commissioner of the New York City Health Department. Dr. Frieden, as I've said, is currently the president and CEO of Resolve to Save Lives, an initiative of the Global Health Organization, Vital Strategies. We are really happy and honored to have both of you here. You have the next 50 minutes to take us to the last session. And as we say in Africa, we save the best for last. I know why this is the best for last. We have talked about mRNA the whole 2 days. And here are two people who are going to talk to us, or rather to moderate a session that is going to enlighten us on mRNA opportunities and especially challenges of production in Africa. Thank you very much. Welcome, Dr. Yoade, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. As you've just heard from the MC, we've definitely not left it's not last, but it's leaving the best till the last. As he said, we've talked about mRNA vaccines for the last few days, and we've talked about just how exciting this moment is. We're living in exciting times. There's an opportunity in every crisis, and I want to congratulate Africa CDC, my brother John Nkegasong, the Africa Union for this incredible initiative. We're here because this is the time is now. The fierce urgency of now has come upon us, and Africa must rise and Africa must take charge of her own destiny when it comes to vaccines. We're 25% of the continent's usage of vaccines every year, we heard yesterday. And so we need to begin to produce our own vaccines. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Tom Frieden, who's going to frame the session and will introduce our wonderful panelists for this session.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here with you. Thank you for the Africa CDC for bringing us together. And one of my favorite African traditions is to say, all protocol observed. So we can save time, but realize that we really do appreciate a lot of the enormous work that's gone on and the work until now. What they've asked me to do, which I'll do in just 2 or 3 minutes, is to frame this and then introduce our very august panel and then turn it back over to Yodi for the moderation of the panel. We know that vaccines are what will end the COVID pandemic. And we know that as currently being rolled out, that won't happen until perhaps 2023. We are too far away. It's not a question of slicing the pie more fairly, though we should do that. It's a question of having a bigger pie, of increasing manufacturing. It's been said before, but it bears repeating. An old saying from the US, maybe it's, I don't know where it's from, but an old saying, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And so we need to work today to do this. We have to scale up production of all of the different vaccine technologies, but I would argue especially mRNA, because it can be scaled up more rapidly, because it can be tweaked for variants more quickly, because it is less susceptible to production delays. And now we know today, perhaps because it's also safer. Transferring technological know-how is one of the most important steps we'll take, but it's not as simple as open IP. It needs hands-on technical support. It's been compared to a 3-star Michelin restaurant. You can get the recipe, but that doesn't mean you can replicate the food. I'd like to challenge in this next 50 minutes, can we establish a grand bargain? A grand bargain of supply chain collaboration, regulatory, customs, and labor appropriate regulation, transparency on cost and pricing in exchange for real technical transfer, regional resources, understanding that if a company can't make enough of the vaccine for the world, but people will die because they cannot get that vaccine, there is a responsibility globally to share that technology, to do it in a way that's fair, that provides a return on investment. After all, if you weren't going to make it for that population, any royalty you get is pure profit. The central importance of distributing manufacturing for regional health security. Can the public sector be flexible enough to provide the dynamism of the private sector? And can the private sector provide the public good along with the public sector? At what level does the need for a global public good outweigh the commercial interests of an individual company? When one person dies, when 1,000 people die, when 1 million people die? That's the question before us. How quickly can we expand and scale up know-how? I don't buy that it will take 3 to 5 years. I don't buy it, even though I'm not an expert. And we'll hear from the panel more about this, particularly with some of the newer technologies. But fundamentally, I think, let me introduce our panel and then leave one last thought before turning it back over to Jodi. We have on our panel Dr. Rick Bright, head of the Rockefeller Pandemic Prevention and Response Program and former director of BARDA in the US. BARDA is the entity in the US that invests in things like mRNA technology, which was paid for with US taxpayer resources from NIH and BARDA. Dr. Jason Kelly, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Ginkgo Blowworks. It's a synthetic biology company that promotes programs in chemical, pharmaceutical, food, and energy industries. Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, Chairman and CEO of Immunity Bio and Nantworks, well-known physician, surgeon, scientist, inventor, technologist, and philanthropist. Delighted to have them on the panel, along with Mr. Stefan Bancel, CEO of Moderna. He's been Moderna's CEO since October 2011. And before then was CEO of bioMérieux, so he knows well this field. And of course, Moderna is in a very pivotal position. And before turning it back over, I'm going to set up one last question. Right now, the world is at a crossroads. And if we do it right, we will scale up manufacturing. And the companies will be heroes. Moderna will be a hero. And that will have enormous benefits, not just for the world, not just for stock price, but perhaps most importantly for the morale of the employees. If you look at a program like Mectizan with Merck, it is critically important to the self-definition of the company that wants to do good, of course. But if it doesn't collaborate, if we don't work together, public and private, to create the critical mass of technical expertise, a cadre of people who can help scale up in a modular way, manufacturing with appropriate protections and reasonable royalties. If we don't do that, then it has the risk of being a villain. So we have the choice of hero or villain. Now I turn it over to you, Jodi.
Thank you, Tom. That was beautifully set up, and thank you for introducing our panel today. I'm going to go, since you've laid it so beautifully, I'm going to go straight to you, Stefan. You are the hero of the moment. Let us speak that forth, in that the mRNA technology is incredibly exciting right now. I mean, today I know we're all hearing news filtering through about various concerns on other platforms, and the world is really turning and saying that, as Tom said earlier in our conversation, that it's like an insurance policy, what you're working at Moderna. So from your perspective, surely the possibilities for vaccine manufacturing are endless, and the potential is not just for life, but also for profits. So how do we turn that business case into action? You know, how do we've heard a lot the last few days about the possibility, but I think what I'd like you to talk about today is the probability. Let's get real with what we're talking about. You know, it's been possible, yeah, we know that, but what is probable, and how do you see that happening, considering the fact that we in Africa, we're looking for partnerships, not for charity? Over to you, Stefan.
Well, Dr. Oyade, thank you so much for the kind words. Dr. Friedman, it's good to see you. And I would like again to thank the Africa CDC for this invitation with this great panel. I have a chance to know most of the members of the panel, and it's good to see you all. So let me put a little bit of context, because I think we need to understand different time horizons. So first of all, as Rick knows very well, in 2019, Moderna was not a commercial company. We were an early stage development company. And in the total year, we made 100,000 doses full year of 2019. When the pandemic started last year, in the first days of January, we started chasing this virus. As you know, we were in the clinic, early March with a great partnership with Dr. Fauci's team. And the vaccine was authorized with very high efficacy in the 94% range at the end of the year. In the first quarter of this year, we've already made 100 million doses. So just put that in context, 100,000 doses for a full year of 2019, 100 million doses, actually it's 110 million doses for the first 3 months of the year. The team have done a job that I think is incredible and we need to recognize. Go to most industries and ask the CEOs of companies making cars or mobile phone, or pick your favorite thing to make, and tell them that in a 12-month time frame, they have to make 10,000 times more products, which is what I told my team last year. I said, we need to make 1 billion doses in 2021, and we're on track for that plan. A month ago, we announced we were adding more capacity, and our goal is to be at 2.8 billion doses for next year. And of course, what has happened over the last 2 weeks on different vaccine platforms is going to make us rethink, is that even enough? And we are very worried about variants. We have been chasing the variant first identified in South Africa, B151, as soon as it was clear it was an issue with neutralizing antibodies. It's in the clinic now. We went into the clinic in 30 days, even faster than last year, was 43 days. And we should have the data because it's a single dose boost. I anticipate, next month, just given we started last month to do the dosing. And so I think to Dr. Friedman's challenge, I think there are different time frames. What's going to happen in 2021 is unfortunately mostly cooked for now, which is because the time it takes to add a significant chunk of capacity is 6 to 9 months minimum if you already have a manufacturing clean suite. Just getting the equipment made, because this is not equipment sitting on anybody's shelf. Those machines have to be built. Those are, $20, $30 million type of equipment. And then they need to be shipped, they need to be installed, because safety is the #1 priority when you give a vaccine to healthy people. They need to be qualified as per the regulatory framework of the different agencies. People need to be hired, trained, raw materials need to be scaled up. So that's a minimum of 6 to 9 months if you have a clean suite ready. Which is why, as I'm saying, being, sitting in early April, unfortunately, most of the capacity for this year is already called for. What I'm already spending a lot of time thinking about is 2022, where I think vaccinating the planet, chasing variants, and chasing as many variants as of concern. The great thing about mRNA technology is we can add 2 or 3 or 5. We have already done 6 different mRNA molecules in a single dose. So we can combine those variants as they emerge and they are of concern. The more midterm framework for me, Dr. Friedman, is what do we do to stand Africa on its feet as a continent with mRNA technology? I've been having meetings in the last few months with my team and different leaders to figure out, is there a framework to build a plant in Africa, a Moderna plant? That's something very much of interest to us, because we think first, COVID is not going to go away, unfortunately. We believe this virus is going to stay with humans and we have to learn to live with it. I think over time, when variants are going to stabilize with less people naive to the virus, it's going to be like over endemic situation. But there are many viruses that we are very interested in helping. Yellow fever, chikungunya, dengue, Zika. Rick Bright and I have known each other for a long time because we are working on the Zika vaccine thanks to support from BARDA under his leadership. We have a chikungunya vaccine in the clinic. We're looking at dengue. We're looking at yellow fever. And so I really think the world would be a better place if we could find a way to bridge with COVID in the next 12 to 18, 24 months with existing manufacturing infrastructure. And then how do we build something in Africa that is there based on Africa soil, where we train people locally. Moderna is very happy to look at investing in a facility in Africa. Filling can be done in existing filling capacity on the continent. And that's a bit our vision for the midterm. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Stefan. You raised some great points. You talked about chasing variants. You also talk about 18 to 24 months. I'm going to come back to you a little bit on that. So if you just, give you a little bit of thinking time for that, because I did catch you on the hoof. But, I say often that we're in a three-way race between variants, virus, and the vaccine. And right now, the variants and the virus are winning, particularly on the Africa continent, places like Brazil, etc. So we need to be a little bit more ambitious in our objectives. I want to go straight to Rick now. And, Rick, you talked, you actually put out the other day very bravely a photo of yourself getting the vaccine and talked about getting your vaccine. I'm not going to announce it here. You can talk about that. But it was wonderful to see the, stating that all vaccines are safe and they're effective. So as we hear about the sort of 12 to 18 month, 24 month scale up, what would you say in terms of scaling up mRNA, that platform on the Africa continent? How quickly do you think we can do this? Because I have to say, we don't have 12 to 24 months. We need to move, and we need to move quickly. Over.
And thank you, Dr. Alakiga and Dr. Frieden. First, I want to express my gratitude to the organizers for this important conference, especially to the African Union Commission and the African CDC. Now, while I know we're focused on mRNA-based vaccines today, I'm going to frame my comments based on my experience in leading a global program while I was in BARDA, collaborating with the WHO, where we actually did this. We expanded influenza vaccine manufacturing capacity in 13 lower and middle income countries. And we did that in a period of 10 years, but that was based on building influenza manufacturing capacity in eggs, and including building chicken farms to lay the eggs and all the complexity of the capacity needed to make egg-based influenza vaccines. We know now from this current outbreak how rapidly we need to be able to respond to an emerging pathogen. And we also saw once again, as we've seen repeatedly, how Africa in particular and other parts of the world are last in line to get vaccines. And while the rest of the world, developed countries have manufacturing capacity, those countries take care of themselves first, and it will always be that way. And so we know the critical need to have local and regional vaccine manufacturing capacity. And that was the premise of this program that we launched back in 2006 across 13 developing countries. And I'm proud to say that it can be done. It can be done, and I think it can be done even easier now with technologies that we have today based on messenger RNA or even some of the adenovirus-based vaccines that are more readily scalable, that are more readily amenable to dropping in a sequence of something new that's emerging and rapidly expanding and scaling that vaccine as quickly as possible. Now, I have to tell you, it wasn't hard. So this is not for the faint at heart. There are lessons learned, and we did get 9 different vaccines licensed out of that program. Many of those are even WHO pre-qualified, and there was a striking difference in those that succeeded and those that failed. And there was a striking difference at the pace at which that development went. We had some manufacturers in some countries that had the capacity built in just a few years, and some of those manufacturers in some of those countries took 10 to 15 years, and some of them didn't make it at all. The difference was the strong commitment from the government, the strong financial commitment long-term from the government in collaboration with the private sector in the country, the international collaboration from an experienced manufacturing company or technology partner, and the scientists who worked in those countries and in those companies. We proved it was possible by supporting at a very minimal amount from government contribution from the US government, honestly about only $50 million of US government contribution was met and matched at sometimes up to a 40-fold commitment and financial commitments from the local governments, on an average about 17-fold in the financial commitment. And then those governments that were successful actually had a business plan on how to use that vaccine. It was really disappointing to see in some places where we built capacity, the local government or the national government did not make a decision to procure that vaccine. There was not a sustainable marketplace for that vaccine. And so we need to make sure that there is a sustainable marketplace, that the capacity built doesn't exceed the demand that is projected for that vaccine or the vaccine portfolio that would come out of that country or that company, and that there was a robust national regulatory authority in play, because the quality standards from that company and those scientists and the quality standards from that national regulatory authority gave confidence not only in the individuals to receive those vaccines, but in that government's ability or that company's ability to sell those vaccines to other governments or to get WHO pre-qualification. So the ability then to hire, train, and retain that highly skilled staff. And believe me, in these countries, when you have that highly skilled staff, they are highly recruitable to other parts of the world. And so the government and the companies have to commit to retaining that staff. And then, of course, you have to keep those facilities active, as we've heard many times in this program. They have to be doing something year-round. So that begs for the need for a portfolio approach for those candidates. And then one more lesson learned before I close is, we learned the hard way to not just chase after the new and shiny. So messenger RNA-based vaccines are new and they're attractive, but that doesn't mean they are for everything, for every disease or for every vaccine candidate out there. There's a robust pipeline of mRNA vaccine candidates in development, but there are other vaccine platforms such as adenovirus vaccines and recombinant-based vaccines. And in our experience, again, learning the hard way, you must have a diversified portfolio, because we don't know what's coming our way, and we don't know if each platform can successfully make a vaccine for that particular pathogen or that threat. So diversification across the country and the continent, I think, is absolutely critical to be successful.
Thanks, Rick. No, you make some good points there. And the one thing I want to pull out of what you said before I just head to Tom very quickly for a comment on some of what we've heard already is you talked about, you know, some great work that you've done in 13 other countries so far. So you know that it is possible. You know, this is not, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. It's been done before, which is excellent. It's not for the faint of heart. You also talk about WHO pre-qualification. And I think that is also a really hot topic that we need to start to consider, because, you know, we've heard a lot the last couple of days about the Africa Medicines Agency. Do we really have to be pre-qualifying everything that is being produced in Africa? And I'm totally playing the devil's advocate here. By WHO, or should we begin to do our own regulation if we're truly going to be masters of our own destiny? So that is something to park on the shelf whilst I head over to Tom to talk a little bit to, you spoke, Rick, about political will and financial commitment, but right now we're in a geopolitical mud fight over vaccines. And I just wonder what Tom has to say to that before I head on to the next panelist.
Thank you so much, and thanks to both of you for your comments and for the moderation. And I know we want to get to Drs. Kelly and Soon-Shiong, but I guess I want to go back to one question. We are in a really unique time globally. This is an unprecedented challenge. This is the 100-year flood, and we're looking at the possibility of millions of deaths, and not just from COVID, but from the continued disruption of routine health systems, from the impoverishment of billions of people, from the loss of educational opportunities. And so I guess I would really challenge, I think the 6 to 9 month minimum sounds really appealing. And what if money were no object, politics were no object, regulation were no object? There was a all hands on deck willingness to say, this is an existential threat for the human race, and we're going to work together to address it. Now, maybe we identify 2 places in Africa, 2 places in Asia, 2 places in Latin America, and say, all right, we're going to have multiple, as Rick was talking, multiple candidates, and then who can move fastest, ensure regulation, ensure it's a global good, not just for the country that it's built in. I mean, what would it take to make that happen? And I'd like to hear more from Stefan, and then turn it back to Yodi for the moderation. Thank you.
Sure. Well, Tom, trust me, that's a question we're asking ourselves every day. And Rick knows last year, he and I used to be on the phone almost on a daily basis as soon as the first cases happened in Wuhan. So the big challenge is, when do you push too hard and break the machine? And what do I mean by that? What the team is doing right now is extraordinary. You know, a few weeks ago in Lonza, our partner in Switzerland, a pump broke. It took 48 hours non-stop. Engineers relayed themselves during the night to change the pump, and then it had to be requalified. We had to recertify and show and prove that the pump was doing what it's supposed to do for the safety of a vaccine. The team have been working now for years, 7 days a week. I cannot go and hire people who know mRNA. That is the challenge of a new technology. If I go to academia, I get people who know mRNA, they don't know industrial GMP processes and requirements. If I go higher, which we have done a lot, people who know GMPs, they don't know mRNA process. And so the challenge we have now is that the teams are running flat out. We're not even finished doing all the tech transfer to deliver the billion for this year. We've just announced yesterday, Rovi, our partner in Spain, adding drug substance capacity. We just signed with Baxter 2 weeks ago for more fill finish capacity. We have quite a number of partnerships that are in the making. The world doesn't know yet, we have not announced that. But the problem is that what I worry daily is, am I pushing too hard my team to the point of breakage, where we will not even be able to do what we're supposed to do this year? And that's the very hard balance we are trying to face. And I have to be honest, it's more art than science to figure out the right tempo. But people have taken no holiday for a year and they work 7 days a week. They are just going on pure adrenaline because they know people are dying. Trust me, my team knows, I know, I watch the news, I have friends who have died, I have family members who have been sick, I know. And that is why what has happened last year has happened. We should not forget, taking a vaccine from nothing to in 11 months an authorization, nobody believed it was possible. When I said it in January, people thought I was sick. And we did it, and Pfizer and the BioNTech team did it too, and AZ just behind, and J&J. And then manufacturing usually takes 3 to 4 years to build a manufacturing engine, to stockpiling. We are hand to mouth. We have zero stock. Every time a lot is made, it's approved, it gets on a truck, it gets in somebody's arm. We have zero stock in all our factories, because that makes no sense given. So my biggest worry now is, if we keep pushing harder, we will break and short people right now in 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, because the $1 billion that is our plan today, it's not in the bag yet. People are sweating bullets right now to making it happen. That's the challenge we have.
You speak to
If
the
I could just,
practicality of it. Oh, well, Tom was going to, okay, Tom.
just very briefly,
Right.
I guess I agree 100%. And I think you and the team there deserves enormous credit for the creativity and for the prowess and for the commitment to, including your commitment not to enforce IP. But I think the question really is, let's take that as given. Everything you've just said is 100% correct. How can the world help? How can we say, it's not just Moderna as a company, it's the world that depends on this. So what more can be done with people, with financing, with regulation, with facilitation, whether it's DPA for things or others globally?
Yeah, so it's not a question of money. Let's all be clear. It is not a question of money.
I'm going to give you a minute to answer that,
sorry.
and we're going to go to Patrick. No, that's fine.
So I would say it's not a question of money, Tom, at all. And trust me, it has not been a question of money for us for a long time. We have taken incredible financial risk, and it's not a question of money. The key is talent now. And we're getting a lot of help. As I tell you, we have many more partnerships that are being implemented as we speak. Jason is on the call here. We are working with his company to help us. We are working with our suppliers. I think the biggest thing that will help the world soon is the US being allowing to export. Today, we're not allowed to export.
That is a great point.
Today, I have incredible manufacturing capacity in the US. Soon, I believe, thanks to the amazing work being done by all the companies, healthcare workers, the US government, and so on, the states, soon the US will not need any more vaccines. Well, I'm still not allowed to export. So that's the type of help. If you want short-term impact, the number one magic wand that we can be using is letting me and other vaccine company export from the US.
Fantastic, Stefan. You're speaking my language, because I think that grand bargain that Tom talked about included that. As we talk about vaccine equity, we need to ensure that countries such as yours are able to export. We begin to open those floodgates to those who need them the most. So yes, we talk about production, but we also talk about the raw materials. I'm going to get to Jason for that. And also, but for right now, I'm going to go to Dr. Sanchong. Patrick, if I may call you Patrick, you're an African innovator, you're an inventor, and you're a medical entrepreneur. So it's really exciting to see you here. I've also been in your newspaper a couple of times. So I'm particularly having a fangirl moment. But what are your thoughts about what is possible? You know, it's exciting times for our region, and it's encouraging to see so many of us coming home back to Africa. And mRNA technology is going to require significant investment, human investment, you know, financial investment, as we've heard. But it's my opinion that we have the capacity, either here or in the wider world, in the diaspora. Over to you. Your thoughts on this issue. Thank you, Patrick. You're on mute.
Please unmute and speak.
He's still muted. Where did he go? Oh no. Have we lost? Did we lose him?
Seems like.
Okay, so I'm going to, oh, is he back? No, sadly. That's unfortunate. Jason, I'm going to head over.
He's back. I can see him, but he's still muted.
Fantastic. There. Please unmute yourself, Dr. San. Sean.
Must be a connection with the microphone.
Fantastic.
Patrick.
I think you've unmuted now. Yes?
Maybe we go to Dr. Kelly.
Okay, we'll go to Dr. Kelly really quickly, and we'll wait for that little tech problem to sort itself out. Yes, Dr. Kelly. So supply chains, raw materials, the meat of the matter, literally at the moment. I mean, it's been really interesting that as around the world, we've talked on and on about vaccines and what we need to do, but there's been very little conversation around, you know, the raw materials. How do we get them? I'm really pleased actually that Stefan mentioned that earlier. Can you tell us a little bit from your perspective of what will be needed on Africa, in Africa, the African continent, for instance? I mean, if we're having the challenges that we're seeing far away, India and other parts of the world. Over to you, Jason.
Yeah, happy to speak about it. I mean, I think, you know, Stefan pointed this out well, you know, going from 0 to hundreds of millions of doses of a new type of vaccine technology, clearly a heroic lift. It also just points out that obviously there wasn't an existing mature manufacturing supply chain, right? Which is both a challenge and an opportunity, right? I think mRNA therapeutics are proving how disruptively valuable they are, the efficacy, the speed, the ability to adjust them quickly for new variants or new diseases that pop up. Those are all very exciting core capabilities of this type of technology. But we got to build that manufacturing chain. So that means there's actually room from a commercial standpoint for new entrants, right? So I do think there's an opportunity to lean in and say, let's build this capability. There's a gap for it in the world. So you know, there will be demand for it that's needed. And so it's a good chance, it's a good opportunity to build. I think, you know, as Stefan also points out, the labor force isn't there. So he's having to train people, right? So if it's a time to train people, great, right? There's not an oversupply of that capability. So it's also a good moment. You're not leaning into training into an oversupplied technology. The other point I would make is, unlike, for example, Rick mentioned sort of the egg-based vaccine production. That's useful for vaccines. It doesn't have as broad of an applicability as the type of facilities you would build out around mRNA vaccine manufacture to be used for other things outside of infectious disease. Protein therapeutics, right? Cell and gene therapy, right? Like both the labor force and the infrastructure that would get built out are also useful more broadly in both therapeutics and Ginkgo works in a lot of other biotechnology areas like, food and ag, there would be utility there as well. So I think it's also a little less of I'm building out something that's very frail and responsive to this one thing, and more of a chance to lay like economic capacity groundwork in biomanufacturing broadly, not just thinking of it as infectious disease response. And that I think is a unique feature of the manufacturing supply chain for mRNA. I think it's quite repurposable. The only other thing I would point out is, I think Africa CDC with efforts like the Pathogen Genomics Initiative, there's also good homegrown work that is supportive of also, this whole supply chain, like being able to identify new variants and that feeding into mRNA. I think, already the steps that have been taken, I think that there are also sort of homegrown efforts there that are really impressive. So anyway, that's a little bit on why I think that the manufacturing supply chain could be general purpose, even outside of vaccines.
Specific to Africa, though, have you had any specific direct experience that you think might be applicable in this setting? I mean, talking about manufacturing on the continent.
Yeah, so we have not, right? So our process has been to essentially help intensify the raw material supply chain and the manufacturing of sort of these nucleic acid-based therapeutics. So what we would hope to do is, by making that process more intensive, it does help to regionalize manufacturing, because you don't need to build out as big of a facility. I think this is also sort of an advantage in mRNA vaccines, but I don't think it should be underestimated, the technology transfer challenge, right? So I do think there's a real set of capabilities. It would have to be an investment to build those out. But I do think, all things being equal, it's a good time to do it, both from a potential of mRNA vaccine demand in the coming years, as Stefan mentioned, but also long-term, a biomanufacturing industry. I think it's a good time for places around the world to be building that. And I think you will see it be regional. And so that's sort of where our experience plugs in. But no, we haven't. We'd be excited to find ways to partner, but we haven't in the past.
Yeah, you make a great point, and I see that Dr. Sunshong is back, but you make a really good point about the fact that everybody's being trained at the moment. So if you're training in the US, you're training in the UK, we might as well train in Africa, because I've heard a lot about, there isn't the capacity available on the continent, but quite frankly, this is also new. There isn't the capacity anywhere. So why don't we all just learn together? Great points there about that. Dr. Shong is not with us. I was going to go to him very quickly, but I do want to pick up a point about hubs and the possibility of manufacturing hubs. So I'm going to go back to Stefan and maybe also to Rick for this, whilst we hope that the other technology issues sort themselves out. And is there any possibility of doing sort of modular, let's dream together, okay? So what are the possibilities here? I'll go to you first, Stefan, and see if Rick has any comments, or Tom, on this.
Yes, I think the modular approach makes a lot of sense. Unlike adenovirus or protein that use, cell system or biological system, we make mRNA, in water, in reactors. Rick knows, because he came to visit our plant. When you see, 10,000 liter reactors in regular plants, the reactors in our plant are in, dozens of liters or hundreds of liters. Like, it's a different orders of magnitude. And so the way we have been able to scale so quickly, because remember, we didn't have anything ready to make 1 billion doses last year when the virus hit us, is we have modularized everything. We basically defined the manufacturing kit, which is just equipment to make around 100 million doses. And we have basically ordered a lot of those machines. We dropped some into our factory in Massachusetts to just expand what we had before. But we dropped those in Lonza in New Hampshire in the US. We dropped the same machines in Lonza in Switzerland. And so when you think about it, this technology is very versatile. So what you need basically is a clean suite GMP envelope for the building. It needs to be, of course, at the right specification in terms of, HVAC system and so on, so we can make safe products. Then you need equipment, which we've totally modularized. Then you need people, and then you need raw materials, which also to increase the chance of not having issues, which is why I think we've been able to scale better than other companies, is we use the same raw material suppliers. And even to Lonza, what we do is we buy everything at Moderna and we ship to them. because we didn't want to take any risk to have different suppliers. As you know, it takes hundreds of materials to make such a product, raw materials. And one of the risks you have, and I think it's what other manufacturing companies are seeing as issues, is they use different suppliers, different machines in different locations. And then the manufacturing process is all over the place. And when you have an issue somewhere, you cannot use the engineers from another site to go help because it's different process. And so I think modularizing everything is the way to go. And as I discussed, as we are discussing in the last few weeks about plans to potentially build a Moderna plant, in the Africa continent, I think for me, the way to do it is to either find an existing GMP envelope or to build a new one. What we did in Massachusetts is we took an old site. It was actually a Polaroid site, nothing to do with pharmaceutical. We gutted the whole site. We only kept the outside walls, and we built a state-of-the-art, brand new HVAC system, GMP suites, and then you drop the machine in there. Even the IT system, it's all on the SAP in the cloud of Amazon, which allowed us to move so fast. It's the same IT system. So we could have
So it's doable. You're part of that grand bargain. I'm going to come back to you in the next few days on email, Stefan. Before I go to Rick, Dr. Sun is back and he's managed to connect. So if we go back to him, I can't see him there. I found you, Dr. Patrick. Welcome back. Can you please unmute yourself and let's take it away. We want to hear about the possibilities from your perspective of what is doable on this continent and the people that we have. Can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm connected.
Yeah, fantastic. I can hear you now.
Fine, thank you. Well, both Dr. Friedman and both of you, and I know time is short here. Let me just tell you with regard to this challenge, and Rick Bright and Rick knows very well, we're literally going to take on this challenge. One, the science in the universities exist. Two, the manufacturing capacity and need to tech transfer is exactly as you said. It's a humanitarian issue, not a company issue. We've committed to do that. And what Rick said is exactly right. No single platform, there's maybe no single magic bullet. However, with the novel, known new methods of genomics, both DNA and RNA, there's a whole new way of thinking about vaccines. And so when you talk about virus variants and vaccines, chasing variants, I think, is very much, a futile issue. And this is where I think a big challenge is for us to rethink that it's not just antibodies, it's T cells. So I look upon this, we come from a background, this crisis is very much like the crisis we faced in 2007, when I, as a CEO of a company called American Pharmaceutical Partners, responsible for heparin, and we had 87 deaths of heparin in the United States, coming from pig intestines. We were able to meet that crisis in 2009 with H1N1, with the ability to create a vaccine from DNA, now with RNA. So I think what is critical is exactly what Tom is saying. If we had strong regulatory, strong government, and strong private and public interaction, but real interaction with real action as opposed to policy and discussion, I made that decision personally that we're going to lead from South Africa. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm from South Africa. So I'm a Asian African American going after the viruses, vaccines, and variants. I think it's so critical for us to actually kill this virus from the outside in, i.e. kill the infected cell, as opposed to just to block it, which means we need to actually think about this not just from antibodies, but correlates of protection beyond that, i.e. T cells. We also have to address this cold chain. It is now possible to make room temperature, oral available, even non-injectable forms, which means then we need to go from DNA and RNA and subunits and organizations like what Rick has been building, people like IDRI, Amris, Baylor Institute, Biologics E. My goal is to work with all of these and BioVac. So Rick was one of the organizations that actually set up in South Africa, BioVac. The institutions at UCT, KwaZulu-Natal, WITS, if it were not for the genomic sequencing of people like Tulio Del Vera, who actually did the genomic sequencing, we wouldn't have understood the variants. So it's not necessary that we in the United States are ahead. We were 43 in terms of genomic sequence behind Senegal. So I think the opportunity for us as Africans, and I consider myself an American, Asian, African, to lead from some areas and actually truly integrate both the manufacturing capacity, the brilliant scientists, the clinical infrastructure from HIV. And then I don't think COVID is all just the issue. Things like HPV, schistosomiasis, neglected tropical diseases. I think one of the other things we need to really worry about beyond that is virally infected cancers, Burkitt's lymphoma. These are diseases that affect millions of people in Africa, for which these have completely been neglected. And the time is right now, and COVID has unearthed this inequalities on the planet, frankly. And I'm giving the commitment here that, sorry about the shortness of time, I know we shortened time, that we're going to take this action and starting in South Africa.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really pleased that we were able to hear from you. I don't know whether your technology, the sort of issues with sound affected you hearing at the very beginning. I did. I introduced you as an African innovator because for us, you're a son of the continent, and we're delighted to hear that you're prepared to take this on. Because that was one of my questions to you, and I think you answered it beautifully, is the fact that we have what it takes. It might be in LA, it might be for me, it was in Fiji about 6 years ago, and now it's in Abuja in Nigeria. It might be in various parts of the world, or it might be in Ibadan, in Uganda, in Harare. We have what it takes, and it's that will to take it on. But if we get back to mRNA and that particular challenge, which is the topic of this conversation, I think we're going to need the will and the push of people such as yourself, as there are others around the continent. And I'm seeing very many questions here about the sharing of IP, but you've raised an important issue that it doesn't just have to be, mRNA IP that is being shared. I wonder what your thoughts are very specifically about that from a sort of from your US hat. What are your thoughts about that?
I think the technology exists, whether it be mRNA, adjuvants, DNA. And what I'm planning to do, frankly, is identifying across the world, whether it be institutions, as I said, from Baylor, organizations like Biologic E India, and mainly, frankly, from academia. There are technologies that exist in academia that have never seen the light of day that are independent of IP, but are actually real vaccines. So I think where we're going to go is open up the opportunity to take that kind of translational and in real time, very quickly go into manufacturing and in real time go into clinic, but under the very rigorous regulatory bodies like SAFRA. So I've had the opportunity to have meetings with SAFRA at the highest level of South Africa, with the highest level of the scientists, Helen Rees and Glenda Gray at the MRC. And coming from a perspective of a manufacturer and a biotech company, in which at APP, we produced 1 million vials of injectables a day for the United States for tens of years. I think the opportunity now to transfer that capacity. I think what is really the biggest issue is where's the gap? And the gap is a translation from the knowledge base to the capacity. And if we can make that capacity, but under rigorous standards, I think Africa literally could lead because of the infrastructure Africa has with regard to infectious diseases.
I think,
and frankly, the clinical material.
Yeah, that really is a beautiful point at which to end this session and hand over to Tom, because I think what you've done, so it was fortuitous in a way that you were the final word, because what you've done is that you have announced to the world that Africa is open for business. Africa is open for vaccine business, for vaccine production. And we're not going to limit ourselves to what exists already. We're going to look at the ranges of possibility. We're going to find that opportunity within this crisis. There's several hidden opportunities within this crisis of today, and we are in the crisis of our lives. But for Africa, I think that the excitement of the moment is that, yes, it might seem like we're behind, but we really have an opportunity to leapfrog into the future as we've done with technology and so many other things. So thank you so much, Patrick, for your contribution. I look forward to hearing from you and staying in touch on this. And I will hand over now to Tom, who is going to give us a final framing of this session, because I see my brother John Kegasong hovering as he waits for the closing session. Thank you so much, everybody. Over to you, Tom.
No, Yodi, I wasn't rushing for the closing, but rather to make this session matter. It's so exciting and fascinating and potentially a game changer that all of you are here and we can truly plan and build a partnership around 3 countries in Africa: South Africa, Senegal, and Kigali. Rwanda. The president of Rwanda was on this platform yesterday and made an open appeal for mRNA vaccine production. We know that Senegal also made the appeal, and Patrick, you just touched on South Africa. So let's make this session matter. Let's build a partnership around mRNA in 3 countries in Africa in 6 months, and we show the world that it can be done. That's all I wanted to say, Yodi.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. It's mRNA plus. We're calling it mRNA plus. The possibilities are endless. And I want to congratulate you, John, on just the most incredible job that's been done with the last few days. I'm beyond proud to be your sister and to be a daughter of this Africa and a partner of Africa CDC. Tom, over to you.
Thank you. I think I really want to thank all of the panelists, especially Mr. Bansal, for the commitment that his company has made and the wisdom that we've gotten from Patrick and Rick and Yoti's facilitation and John's crucial intervention and Jason's optimism about what can be done. Fundamentally, we're in this unique moment of the world where we have the pandemic demonstrating in absolutely incontrovertible terms that we are all in it together. And at the same time, we're facing the potential of one of the worst episodes of inequality that the world has seen, with the haves and the have-nots in terms of a vaccine. Scaling up technologies, certainly we should try many different technologies, but mRNA has unique potential here from what we know now. And as we've heard, money is not an object. Politics is not an object. The concerns about profits and intellectual property can be managed. People are always the scarcest resource, trained, skilled people. But there are lots of brilliant people who can be trained, and lots of ways to amplify and replicate experiences. And we have in at least Rwanda, Senegal, and South Africa exactly what Mr. Bansal wanted: full GMP equivalent HVAC, clean, ready to use. So we have an old rule in public health: never do a pilot in just one place. Always try 2 places and select them in places where you can supervise and support well, and select them with leaders who are likely to succeed. So I hope reality comes out of this. And I don't know, Mr. Bansal, if you want to give us the last word.
Well, I just would like to thank everybody, not only on the panel, but attending this conference. Again, thank the Africa CDC for this important time together. It's really incredible to know that we are where we are today, given where we started a year ago as a planet. Every day we are making progress. And I think, as you said, Dr. Friedman, the most important thing is to keep working together. Sometimes, when I see in some countries, industry and politicians, calling each other names in the media, that is not helping. There's only one enemy, it's a virus. And all of us need to work together, help each other. And I know that we will get this virus under control.
Thank you so much, Stefan. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody. Over to the MC for the closing session.
Thank you, Dr. Yoade. Thank you, Dr. Friedman. And thank you, all the panelists. Honestly, you didn't disappoint. And we look forward to gaining from, this technology transfer and technology sharing that has been committed to in this panel. Now, incredibly, we have come to the very last session of this historic conference, the closing ceremony. It definitely is not my place to run this session, but as we say in parts of Africa, when a child washes his or her hands, they can eat with elders. An apt saying, by the way, in this era of COVID-19. I'll be back, but for now, let me, with humility and gratitude, invite Dr. John Nkengasong, the director of Africa CDC, to make remarks on the key outcomes of this conference, invite Dr. Richard Hatchett, the CEO of CEPI, and lead the signing of an MOU with Africa CDC. Thank you very much. I'll be back later. Dr. Nkengasong.
John, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was just thanking the MC for the great work and moderation you have been doing the whole day. And Yodi, my sister, thank you for the excellent moderation in the last panel. And the fact that there are still over 700 people on this platform speaks to the importance of this very unique and game-changing conference. So I was tasked by the organizing group to provide the closing remarks and the next steps, which I will do in less than 10 minutes. So I think if you heard, like myself, we are attentive over the last 2 days, you probably heard clearly that we need to act now, act collectively, and act differently. And the vision for the Africa Vaccine Manufacturing Conference and going forward remains simple: to ensure that Africa has timely access to vaccines, to protect public health security by establishing a sustainable vaccine development and manufacturing ecosystem. The key word here is the ecosystem, which we have discussed over and over for the last 2 days, that we cannot do the vaccine manufacturing in isolation. So there are two major outcomes of this meeting. One is the launch of the Partnership for Africa Vaccine Manufacturing, in abbreviation PAM, which will now become a household name across the continent and the world. Second is a framework for action with clear milestones, which I'll come back to that. So first of all, let's look at the partnership. There's a saying that alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much. In quote, Helen Adams Kille. And we believe that partnerships, and trusted partnership for that matter, will be critical to support Africa's vaccine manufacturing agenda, the PAM. We all heard from His Excellency President Tshisekedi, the chair of the African Union, who calls for a new public health order for our health security, and actually emphasized the need to have a vaccine security, a diagnostic security, and therapeutic security. He further went on to call for a partnership, to launch for a partnership for African vaccine manufacturing, in abbreviation PAM. And this partnership has 5 key areas. One is to have a coordinated agenda setting for the continent. Second, to support the establishment in a stepwise fashion of 5 regional collaborating, 5 regional vaccine production sites in Africa over the course of the next couple of years, 10 years to 15 years. Second, to mobilize resources, especially build financial partnerships that will help us achieve this agenda, and to strengthen regional vaccine regulatory systems across the continent, especially the African Manufacturing Agency. And lastly, technology transfer and workforce development. We've all discussed, I believe that was 2 sessions ago, the need to engage with the universities so that they can be the hubs that will enable us to dive into the research and development agenda for the continent for vaccines. The partnership between the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness, CEPI, and African Union is one of the two partnerships that will be signed during this closing ceremony. That partnership, that is the partnership between the African Union and CEPI, speaks in 4 areas. One is in the areas of pandemic and outbreak preparedness, innovation in vaccine manufacturing, talents and technical know-how, and enabling science. And it shall leverage existing networks and partnerships across the continent to ensure that it supports President Tshisekedi's launch of the PAM. The second partnership that will be signed today is the partnership between the Afrixim Bank and the African Finance Corporation, the AFC. And this will be done to support 4 areas. 1, identifying and engaging other partners, co-financing transactions and projects, providing preparatory support to project developers and promoters, and providing policy and advocacy support to unlock major barriers for vaccine manufacturing on the continent. And we'll come back to that in the signing ceremony itself. The African Union and Africa CDC aspiration, as we have discussed over the last 2 days, is simple, that we need to move from where we are today, where we import 1% of our vaccines, to over 60% of local manufacturing in the next 20 years. We are fully aware that this would be a challenge, but we're also fully aware that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I would not repeat what we discussed at the opening yesterday, but these are some very specific targets that we have set on this partnership. That is the partnership to advance manufacturing of vaccines on the continent. The second outcome of this meeting is a framework for action with clear milestones. And let me, at this point, quote what Churchill said many years ago. He said, "He who fails to plan is planning to fail." If Africa doesn't plan to address its vaccine security needs today, then we are absolutely setting ourselves up for failure. We need to learn lessons from other countries. It took India 5 years to 10 years for some companies to reach large scale. It took Brazil 7 to 15 years to complete successful technology transfer. And it took 15 years to obtain WHO pre-qualification for 12 vaccine types. So we are fully aware that the journey ahead will be an uphill task, but a task that deserves that we start that journey today. So because of that, our plan is a stepwise approach, engaging the 5 regions of the continent, starting with field and finish and technology transfer, and also engaging in a regional manner, vaccine manufacturing and research hubs in all 5 regions of the continent. And as you can see on this map, we truly want to highlight 2 things: vaccine manufacturing by region, and also research that will lead to vaccine development, R&D, and guided by universities. We heard in a session that was chaired by Professor Samba, so the critical need for universities to play a central role. We also heard during this conversation, especially just the last session, the importance of trying to look at leapfrogging ourselves forward and building on the messenger RNA technology that Yodi Riley described as messenger RNA plus, that will be used for vaccine production across the continent. And I think we challenged the last panel that we should build an alliance with all of them to begin to actually engage countries like Senegal, Rwanda, and South Africa, and build a partnership that would generate this and move this meeting into truly an action. We are looking forward to that. And we have a champion. President Kagame himself yesterday said this, and I quote, vaccine equity cannot be guaranteed by goodwill alone. As we have seen many examples to convince all of us, Africa needs to expand production capacity for vaccines and other essential medicines, end of quote. He further called on messenger RNA platforms for vaccine production on the continent. So you truly have political leadership across the continent. You also heard a message from the Minister of Health of Senegal, which was delivered on behalf of President Macky Sall for the need to engage with Pasteur Institute in Senegal as one of the sites for vaccine production on the continent, especially using messenger RNAs. To do this, we require that we have some very key building blocks, and we identified 5 of them. One of them is a strong coordinating role of the African Union and the Africa CDC. We need to focus on regulatory strengthening, access to finance, the infrastructure itself, and the talent and the know-how. We are very privileged that we already have the African Medicine Agency that requires other partnerships to strengthen it and launch it. We heard yesterday and today a strong commitment from the African Development Bank and the Afrixim Bank. We also need the REX, that is the regional economic bodies and member states, to engage and commit themselves to infrastructure development, and of course, research institutes and universities across the continent. Those are what we call enablers or building blocks that will enable us to meet our roadmap and framework for the continent. We need additional partnerships. So this is just the beginning of a long journey. So we need additional partnerships across all 4 areas. So to conclude, what are the next steps? First of all, we'll issue a communique tomorrow that will describe the important work that we did yesterday and today. We will be establishing a task force by different work streams that will go to work immediately, so that this meeting is not just another conference, but it's truly a conference that will be remembered that led to the transformation of the landscape of vaccine manufacturing on the continent. We plan to release the entire framework with specific actions and milestones by the 3rd quarter of 2021. That is this year, just a few months. And lastly, the progress of this work will be submitted to the Bureau of the Head of States in the 4th quarter for consideration, and subsequently to take it possibly to the Assembly of the Head of States. Let me conclude then by again rephrasing Nelson Mandela, who said, "It always seems impossible until it is done." The journey ahead of us will be tough, but unless we engage on that journey, we'll never get to the end of the journey. I thank you so much for the opportunity to summarize this meeting and provide the way forward. We will now go to the next set of activities, which I invite my friend Richard to give a few remarks, and then we'll move on to the signing ceremony of the partnership between CEPI. Richard.
Right. Thank you, John. I'm delighted to join Dr. John today in signing this memorandum of understanding that will link the efforts of CEPI with those of the African Union and Africa CDC to promote vaccine research, development, and manufacturing on the African continent. Many of you won't know, but CEPI's permanent board held its first meeting in Addis Ababa in the spring of 2018, and Ethiopia was the first African country to join CEPI. So it is a pleasure to return, even if just symbolically, to establish this important partnership. As you all know, COVID-19 has challenged the world, and it has demonstrated that the world was not ready for a pandemic. And unfortunately, it has also underscored the inequity that we all know exists in terms of access to medical products. But it has also heralded significant efforts to promote global cooperation to accelerate the development of vaccines against a shared threat. New organizations such as CEPI and Africa CDC, which are almost exactly the same age, have risen to the occasion, while more established alliances and organizations such as the African Union, WHO, and Gavi have stepped into the breach to promote regional and global cooperation. The ACT Accelerator and COVAX have advanced the cause of equitable access, even if we have not yet achieved equity. Last month, CEPI launched a new strategy to radically reduce the impact of epidemic and pandemic diseases by supporting vaccine and manufacturing innovations around the world. Our long-term goal is to compress vaccine development timelines to just 100 days, to develop universal vaccines against COVID and other beta coronaviruses, and to create a library of vaccine candidates for use against known and unknown pathogens. A critical part of this strategy will be CEPI's partnership with R&D and manufacturing institutions in low and middle income countries. The impact of the emerging infectious threats that CEPI focuses on pose a heightened risk to populations in these regions. So there is an urgent need to build resilience and preparedness and response capacity where the greatest risk is in these countries. We gain strength, enormous strength, by working together, and it will only be through working together that we can tackle the enormity of the task in front of us. That's why I'm delighted to expand CEPI's collaboration with Africa CDC and the African Union. Together, our goal is to work to develop the infrastructure and expertise to undertake the epidemiological and clinical studies needed to advance vaccine development, to support technology transfer, and to develop national and regional manufacturing capacity that will enable the countries of Africa to take full ownership of their national health security. And most importantly, through our partnership, we will enable equitable access to the vaccines that we develop for the benefit of all Africans, including the fair allocation of COVID-19 vaccines. I and CEPI stand in solidarity with the African Union and look forward to working together with the African Union and Africa CDC, scientists in Africa and institutions in Africa to strengthen Africa's capacity to prevent, to detect, and to respond to emerging and infectious re-emerging disease threats. Thank you so much.
So we shall now proceed with the signing. Richard, so you can sign the last page and then we will lift it and show that.
Wonderful.
Good, good.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
John, thank you.
Thank you. So let's now invite the next partnership agreement between AFC and the Afrixim Bank to come on and do the signing. Professor,
Yeah, so yeah, exactly, Dr. Kengasong. At this point, we'd like to invite Professor Benedict Orama, and as he prepares to come, I would like to say a few words about the next agreement, which Dr. Kengasong has ably spoken to. So this cooperation agreement between Afrixim Bank and AFC is to support the development of vaccine manufacturing capacity in Africa in view of the challenges confronting Africa as a result of the ongoing vaccine nationalism with respect to COVID-19 pandemic. Under the agreement, Afrixim Bank and AFC commit to collaborate in supporting the development of vaccine manufacturing in Africa by a number of actions. One of them is identifying and engaging potential investors as well as partners to join our institutions in developing vaccine manufacturing. Secondly, providing preparatory funding to support project developers and promoters in developing required feasibility and technical studies to attract required financing. Thirdly, co-financing transactions and projects geared at developing vaccine manufacturing across Africa. And finally, providing policy and advocacy support to unlock major market barriers in vaccine manufacturing. The two institutions are dedicated to converting the aspirations detailed in the cooperation agreement into visible projects within a relatively short time frame. Professor Orama.
Thank you very much. Let me also thank John for this opportunity. His Excellency, President Felix Tshisekedi chairperson of the African Union and the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo. His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, chairperson of the African Union Commission. Excellency Dr. John Kengasong, the director of Africa CDC, Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Let me also recognize our partner, my good brother, Samaila, the president and CEO of the AFC. On behalf of the board and management of Afrixim Bank, I take this opportunity to thank His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, chairperson of the African Union Commission, and Dr. John Kengasong, director of the Africa CDC, for giving us the opportunity to sign this cooperation agreement for the development of vaccine manufacturing capacity in Africa on this platform, as well as for convening this very successful summit on vaccine manufacturing in Africa. Permit me to also express our appreciation to the president of AFC, Mr. Samaila Dubairu, and the AFC team for the partnership we are consummating today. The significance of this event is not lost on us. As I listened to speaker after speaker since yesterday, I could feel the frustration across the continent, as well as the optimism, especially considering the challenges that Africa is confronted with as a result of the ongoing vaccine nationalism. And before vaccines, we also had PPEs and test kits nationalism. As we sign this agreement today, we are fully aware that we are committing to a daunting task, requiring a collaborative approach with multiple stakeholders. As AFC is also committed to promoting regional value chains and pharmaceutical manufacturing in Africa, there can be no better partner to embark on this journey with. We all share the same vision that vaccine manufacturing in Africa, and indeed a vibrant pharmaceutical industry in Africa, will have significant impact on the continent by guaranteeing access to critical vaccines, medical supplies, or pharmaceuticals when they are needed and at an affordable price. It will also set the stage for the development of research and development capacity that the continent needs to become an effective player in the global pharmaceutical industry. As an importer of 99% of the vaccines it currently consumes, such a facility we are planning to develop can contribute in conserving foreign exchange, creating employment, and fostering transfer of technology. Under the agreement we are signing today, we are committing to identify and engage potential investors as well as partners to join our institutions in developing pharmaceutical parks and vaccine manufacturing facilities, providing preparatory funding to support project developers and promoters in developing required feasibility and technical studies to attract required financing. Co-financing transactions and projects geared at developing vaccine manufacturing across Africa, and providing policy and advocacy support to unlock major market barriers in vaccine manufacturing. And as I said earlier in my intervention today, demand certainty is critical. But under the current situation where we have the Harvard Trust acting as a platform for pooled procurement of vaccines for Africa against the COVID-19, we also see opportunity of using this platform to create the demand to support the projects will be promoting. Under the partnership, we will get to work in converting our collective aspirations to visible projects within a relatively short time frame. It is strong institutions like our two institutions that can convene other financiers and make it possible for us to mobilize the blend of financing, grants, commercial funding, and others needed to create a strong manufacturing base for vaccines and pharmaceuticals on the continent. It is pertinent to note that our institutions have also been collaborating on the vaccine financing initiative that will enable African Union member states to rapidly access COVID-19 vaccines at competitive prices and in a timely manner to mitigate the protracted financial and socioeconomic costs of the COVID-19 pandemic. This initiative is currently being implemented under the auspices of the African Union Africa Vaccine Acquisition Task Team, AVAT. We are also partners under the Arise IP platform, through which we developed and are developing industrial parks in Gabon, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, Benin, and elsewhere. We thank all AFC senior management team members who are represented here today for working very hard to make today possible. I also take this opportunity to thank all our Afrixim staff who worked hard to make this event a resounding success. Finally, many thanks to the AU under the leadership of His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat for driving the continental agenda in responding effectively to the pandemic. It is through his vision that we are gathered here today, and we express our appreciation. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Professor Orama, for those very kind remarks. I would like to continue on the protocols you've already established. Again, I would like to thank the African Union and African Center for Disease Control for organizing this fantastic seminar that is leading to this outcome. Professor Orama, my brother, has said most that needs to be said on this initiative. We knew that before COVID, Africa was importing over 20% of the vaccines produced globally. So clearly now is the time for us to have our own vaccine production on the continent. At the AFC, at the Africa Finance Corporation, we have been very active de-risking projects, de-risking opportunities over the last 13 years. And this is another opportunity that we'll de-risk for other investors to work alongside us. I want to assure you that with Africa Finance Corporation and AFC and Afrixim Bank, we will get to work quickly, and we would start by ensuring that we have the right framework to roll out this program. We're going to build the right partnerships to ensure that this is implemented, and we'll get to work. After this ceremony, we're going to come back with an implementation plan that will detail responsibilities amongst the partners and around the various entities that we're going to partner with to roll out the program. So, I mean, there's nothing more to say other than we're ready to get the work done, and we'll get it done.
Wonderful. I'll now invite both of you to do the signing and then hold up the document to the screen for 5 seconds. And Staples Muchima, please stand by. After that signing ceremony, I would like you to take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Staples.
Next, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is now my honor to invite His Excellency Felix Tshisekedi Tshilombo, Chairperson of the African Union and President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, for his closing remarks on the closing of this webinar.
Okay, let's finish.
Bien, merci. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Excellences, Monsieur le Président de la Commission de l'Union africaine, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, distingués invités, Mesdames et Messieurs, nous voici arrivés à la fin de cette importante réunion. J'ai régulièrement été informé des échanges fructueux de haut niveau qui ont eu lieu entre les éminents leaders et experts du continent et du monde. Les résultats ont été au-delà de nos attentes. Avec l'importation de 99% de vaccins utilisés, vous avez sans conteste apprécié cette réunion et démontré qu'il y a eu nécessité pour le continent d'investir dans la fabrication locale de produits thérapeutiques, de vaccins et de diagnostics. La tâche ne sera pas aisée car il nous faudra passer de 1% de production locale à plus de 20% d'ici les 20 prochaines années. Nous avons apprécié la volonté de nos partenaires de nous accompagner pour bâtir le nouvel ordre de santé. Vous avez discuté en vous référant à la vision claire contenue dans l'agenda 2063 de notre organisation.
Containing Agenda 2063 of our own organization. You have discussed your experiences and your knowledge and demonstrated that nothing would be impossible if we can bring together the following elements. Strong leadership of the different countries and of Africa, the presence of African leaders, all my brothers and friends, the President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, Paul Kagame of Rwanda, and Macky Sall of Senegal, yesterday demonstrated in the course of the opening ceremony this goodwill. A favorable environment would enable us to achieve this local manufacturing of vaccines, be it at a routine level or for pandemics such as COVID-19 or Ebola. We need to have harmonized laws as well as other similar incentives. High quality human resources are also necessary. We have begun capacity building and we will count on high level experts that do exist in Africa as well as the world over. We solemnly look forward towards the African diaspora across the world to help in capacity building, leading towards manufacturing of medicines and vaccines here in Africa. An efficient partnership based on mutual respect as well. We appreciated the goodwill of our partners who have expressed the will to work with us, and in your actions, you did not forget the important place occupied by our pharmaceutical companies. We will ensure that they play a strong role. We have a clear role, and not just towards fighting COVID-19, but also to facilitate manufacturing of vaccines against known diseases, as well as vaccines against epidemics and pandemics. I also understood that we need to work very quickly but efficiently. We have to work now. Now is the key word. I commend the signature of the two MOUs, an MOU between the African Center, the African CDC, as well as the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, CEPI, as well as the signature, an MOU between Afrixim Bank and the African Finance Corporation, AFC, I also listened on the first day to the goodwill of the World Health Organization as they expressed readiness to work with us. We reiterate our will to accompany the establishment of a new health security situation during our mandate. Your reflections will not be kept in the wardrobes. Dr. John Kengasong will work so that there will be a strong follow-up and the actions recommended in our resolutions be undertaken. And to this end, personally, I commit to work towards independence within our own centers and to work so that all these actions will come to fruition. I would like to thank all participants that in the course of the last 2 days worked towards this initiative, the Africa Vaccine Manufacturing for Health Security, an initiative that will have at least 5 regional centers for production and manufacturing for vaccines in Africa towards Africa's health security, mobilization of resources with bilateral, multilateral partners and the private sector, technology transfer across the continent, and lastly, the strengthening of regional research centers. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. I hand back the chair to you, Chacha.
Thank you very much. And with His Excellency's speech, we come to the end of this historic conference. Thanking you all once again is your MC, Chacha Mwita, a communication and policy engagement consultant based in Nairobi, Kenya. It was a great pleasure and honor to host you in this historic conference for the last 2 days. AU, Africa CDC, the organizing committee, and Dr. John Kengasong, thanks for making it happen, and thanks for the opportunity. Bye-bye, everybody.